I never thought I'd be the kind of person to get involved in something so dark. But sometimes, life takes a turn that leads you down a path you never imagined. This is my story, and it all started on a chilly afternoon in Detroit. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping my coffee and scrolling through social media. That's when I saw the post that changed everything. It was a photo of my husband, Mark, with another woman. They were smiling, looking cozy at some trendy cafe downtown. My heart sank as I realized this was no friendly outing. Mark was cheating on me. At first, I couldn't believe it. I thought back to our life together, the late nights he'd claimed were work meetings, the excuses about being stuck in traffic. Everything started to click into place. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal swirling inside me. My hands trembled as I looked at the picture again, the woman's face glaring at me. She looked so happy, and I couldn't help but feel my world crumbling. For weeks, I tried to confront Mark about my suspicions, but he always had an excuse ready. I decided to gather evidence. I started following him, hiding my anger behind a calm exterior. Every time I saw him with her, my heart broke a little more. It felt like I was living in a nightmare, and I was powerless to wake up. One night, I decided to confront him. I waited until he got home, trying to remain calm. "Mark, where were you today?" I asked, my voice shaking. He hesitated, and I could see the guilt flash in his eyes. "Just at work, babe," he replied, but I knew it was a lie. I had seen him. I felt like I was losing my mind. Days turned into weeks, and my anger boiled over. I spoke to friends about what I should do. One suggested that I get back at him. I brushed it off at first, but the thought lingered. It was like a seed planted in my mind, growing into something darker. I couldn't just let this go. I wanted revenge. Then I met a man named Dave through a mutual friend. He was rough around the edges, but charming in a way that made me feel alive again. We talked for hours about everything: life, love, and betrayal. One night, I mentioned my situation, half joking about how I wished I could make Mark pay for what he did. I could see the wheels turning in Dave's head. "I can help you with that," he said, a glint in his eye. At first, I laughed it off, but as the days went by, the idea took root. What if I could make him pay? The thought consumed me. I never intended for it to go this far, but the rage inside me was growing. One evening, after another fight with Mark, I finally snapped. I called Dave and met him at a bar. I was nervous, but something inside me had shifted. "I want to do it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want him gone." Dave smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. Over the next few weeks, we discussed the plan in detail. I couldn't believe I was actually considering this, but the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the only option. Mark was a good husband in many ways, but he had betrayed my trust, and I felt justified in wanting revenge. Dave introduced me to a man named Rick, who supposedly had experience with these kinds of situations. I met Rick in a dimly lit parking lot, my heart racing. He was everything I expected: cold, calculating, and surprisingly professional. After discussing the details, I handed over the money, and he assured me that it would be taken care of. I felt a rush of adrenaline and fear wash over me. The days leading up to the planned day felt surreal. I went about my normal routine, but I was always on edge. I would see Mark and put on a smile, but inside I was a whirlwind of emotions. I thought about the life I would have once he was gone, the freedom, the peace. Then, the day arrived. I sat at home, pacing back and forth, waiting for the news. I had arranged for Rick to make it look like an accident. When my phone finally buzzed, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. "It's done," Rick said, his voice calm. I was stunned into silence. I felt like I had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But then things took a turn I never expected. The police showed up at my door the next day. They wanted to ask me some questions about Mark's death. My heart raced as they asked me where I was at the time of the incident. I stammered out a story, trying to keep my voice steady. They seemed suspicious but left after I answered their questions. In the following days, the investigation deepened. I could see news reports about Mark's death, the circumstances surrounding it. The more I watched, the more I felt trapped in my own web of lies. I was on edge, and every time the doorbell rang, my heart would skip a beat. The FBI got involved, and I learned they were digging into Mark's life, looking for any clues. I felt a sense of dread creeping in. They had mentioned an ongoing investigation into potential foul play, and my mind raced with panic. What if they found out? I continued to meet with Dave and Rick, but something had shifted. The thrill was gone, replaced by fear. I felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the inevitable fallout. Dave tried to reassure me, saying that everything would be fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The weeks dragged on, and I felt more isolated than ever. I avoided my friends, fearful that they would sense something was off. I was living a lie, and the weight of it was suffocating. The FBI was still investigating, and I felt like I was caught in a trap of my own making. Then one day, I received a call from Rick. He was nervous and told me that the FBI was closing in on him. I could hear the panic in his voice. "You need to be careful," he warned. "They're asking questions about everyone connected to this." My heart dropped. I was terrified that my name would come up. From that moment on, I tried to distance myself from Dave and Rick. I knew I had to lay low, but the guilt of what I had done was eating away at me. I felt trapped in a situation that spiraled out of control, and I didn't know how to escape it. As the investigation intensified, the FBI started to piece together the timeline of events. They had spoken to my neighbors, friends, and even family. It was only a matter of time before they would find something that linked me to Mark's death. I started to panic, wondering if I would be arrested for something I never really wanted. Then, one night, I received a knock at my door. My heart raced as I opened it, only to be greeted by 2 FBI agents. They asked to come in, and I felt my stomach drop. They began questioning me about my whereabouts during the time of Mark's death. I tried to remain calm, giving them vague answers, but I could see their skepticism. The agents left after a long, tense conversation, but I knew they weren't convinced. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, and I felt the walls closing in on me. My worst fears were coming true. They had a suspicion, and it was only a matter of time before they would find the truth. In the following days, I tried to lay low, but I couldn't escape the feeling of dread that hung over me. I knew I had to cut ties with everyone involved. I stopped answering Dave's calls and avoided any places where I might run into Rick. I was terrified that they would crack under pressure and spill everything to the authorities. Then, just when I thought I could breathe again, the FBI reached out to me again. They wanted to meet at the station. My heart sank as I realized this was it. I was going to be caught. I could feel the walls closing in as I made my way to the station, knowing I had nowhere left to run. At the station, they laid out their evidence, and I felt the ground drop beneath me. They had linked me to Rick and had surveillance footage of our meetings. I felt sick to my stomach. I tried to maintain my composure as they pressed me for answers, but deep down, I knew I was trapped. It was over. I confessed everything. The anger, the betrayal, it all spilled out in a flood of emotions. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I told them about my plan, about meeting with Dave and Rick, and how I had orchestrated Mark's death. I felt a mix of relief and horror as I spoke. The agents listened, taking notes, and when I finished, they looked at me with a mix of disbelief and pity. I was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder. As I sat in the interrogation room, I realized that my life would never be the same again. Mark's death had spiraled out of control, and I had lost everything in the process. I thought I would find peace and closure, but all I found was regret. The anger that had consumed me had led me to make choices I could never take back. In the end, I faced the consequences of my actions. I learned that revenge comes at a price, and sometimes that price is far too high. The FBI had caught me, and I would have to face the reality of my choices for the rest of my life.